This is Mac with the Mac Commentary. And this morning I have my co-host Bob here with me. Bob, how are you this morning on this beautiful day? And how's everything up there in Michigan?
I'm doing just great, Mac. Thank you very much for asking. And things in Michigan are nice. It's a bright, sunshiny day, probably, I would say, in the high 30s, maybe low 40s. And I'm sitting here having my morning essential nutrients for good health.
Well, that's great. More people should follow your lead on that, eating right and exercising and doing the right things so that can add longevity to their lives rather. Bob, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think you're absolutely right about that. If they watch what they eat and they try to exercise and take care of themselves, perhaps they can live a long life like many of those that lived in Scripture, in biblical Scripture.
Well, you're so right on that. Well, one of the things I noticed, Bob, that we've talked in the past about the black genocide and fratricide and all these other different sides that's being perpetrated against the black man. And here, over the last couple of years, there's been something really devastating that's been happening with the Flint water debacle, and I'm just really surprised that so many people are trekking up to Flint carrying bottles of water when the state has already set aside $30 million to try to clean up the mess that the state made. And nobody seemed to have caught that for that period of time. And it amazes me how you could let something like the drinking water become so toxic and tainted when you have so many different agencies that oversee this type of utility in America. And to me, it reminds me of some type of third world country. And I think that's what most of the communities in Black America, they are third world countries. They are ran like that. And what also really distresses me, not so much as not just that problem there with the failure of the agencies and different people to go there and resolve that issue, is that we have all of these different celebrities and so-called civil rights leaders and people like that there who are running to Flint to get on the camera and say they are doing this and they're carrying all of this bottle of water there. And what I feel, Bob, that they should be doing is what we've talked about in the past, at least I have, is that they should be sitting down and having conferences and discussing how can they uplift their Black community. They have guys like Big Sean, Magic Johnson. I don't know whether he's been there or not, but I've heard his name mentioned. The president of the Urban League and the NAACP. All these people like that, and the ones, especially the ones who have the money, they should come together and say, hey, we should invest money into the uplifting of communities like Flint by building businesses and doing things like that and helping others in that community create businesses. But no, they just want to get in the limelight now so they can sell more records and that go out there and denigrate the black man and the black woman. So to me, it's just a crying shame that we have this type of activity, like they are rallying around to help somebody, when what can somebody do with a bottle of water? Can they take a bath in it? How many bottle of waters will they have to use in order to fill up a bathtub? And that's one of the things that we want to talk about today, Bob, is how this really affects the people up there in Flint itself, because I had a friend, I believe that he expired because of that situation up there. He may have
Yes.
had Legionnaire's disease. And to me, it hit home because I had no idea what was happening. Even though I'm about 80 miles from Flint, I had no idea what was really going on with the water situation there. But I was up there December the 5th for his uh, uh, funeral. And I didn't discuss anything about water with anybody that I spoke to up there. I was only up there a very short period of time. So how are you looking at this situation, Bob, and what's going on?
Well, I think that all of that, the hoopla about carrying bottled water and those kinds of things up there to Flint is really rather absurd, because I just saw where Candace Miller, the representative from that area, has said that she's going to, with a stroke of the pen, have $1 billion with the B dollars provided to that Flint community to try and rectify some of the long-term problems that have arisen as a consequence of the dereliction and the malfeasance of those politicians up there in that area, and particularly the governor. I saw a report in regards to something you just said about Legionnaire's disease just yesterday. A reporter from, I believe, the Michigan News indicated that they know back in March of 2014 that the water up there was causing, that there was Legionnaire's being a result of that, the bacteria in the water there, and that they knew that 100 people had been affected and that 8 people had died. Now, perhaps, and I don't know this, but this is just surmising what you just said, perhaps your friend may have been one of those 8 people who died, that you know, as a consequence of that Legionnaire's. But let's get back to the Flint water circumstance. Flint is, as you say, it's an old manufacturing town. It had Buick City. They manufactured a lot of automobiles there. They've been dumping stuff into the water system for years and years, and they knew that. And the politicians in Lansing, they knew that. The governor knew that. Flint, I think, is 70% black, and so you know, these are disposable people. They could be thrown on the human scrap heap. And now that it's been divulged that they've been drinking this poisoned water for a number of years, and as a matter of fact, ironically, pardon me. One of the people that was responsible for that was a black man. I don't know his name, but he was the so-called emergency hitman put up there by the governor to so-called correct the economic disparities that were occurring in Flint, and the governor has started dispersing his economic hitmen all over the city. Well, back to this guy there in Flint, he, knowing that the water system was poisonous, but because they were trying to supposedly save money, had the water system cut off, even though they had been warned by the city of Detroit that they could work out an arrangement to lower the rates if they would bear with them. He cut that off and told them to connect the water supply back up to the Flint River. And having done that, and hooked that poisonous supply up to the little children's drinking waters there in Flint, the governor promoted him to come down to the city of Detroit and become an emergency hitman for the Detroit school system.
Right.
Where he could,
I've heard about this guy. His name is Early, and you're right. You're right on with what the governor has done. They gave him a $40,000 raise to come down to the Detroit, and as you know, and many people know, the Detroit school system has been devastated after 15 years of emergency management by the state. There are less than 50,000 students in the school system, and they are at the lowest of test scores that the students are.
That's right.
But the thing that really get me on with all of this here, Bob, is the people coming to this state and to Flint in particular, and they're going up there carrying the bottle of waters up there. Nobody is talking about now this. Some people are talking about it, but none of these people are talking about it trying to revitalize and uplifting the black communities. I mean, if you go back, there were many people during the civil rights era and prior that sacrificed much for these guys to make the type of money that they are now making. And they sacrificed their lives back in the 50s and 60s and even the 40s. But none of these people here think it's worthy of their cause to go in and sacrifice some dollar bills to try to uplift the black community and build within that community. Yet they'll come up there and try to get the spotlight so people see, oh, Big Sean is doing this, Big Magic is doing this. Like I believe last year, Magic Johnson came to Detroit and he gave out turkeys at Thanksgiving. Now that's an admirable thing to do, but that's not going to teach people how to feed themselves by giving them turkeys. And you know as well as I do, Bob, that had an incident like this happen in Grosse Pointe or any of the white suburbs in Detroit area, this stuff, some heads would be rolling right now. There would be prosecutors in the counties that's affected. They'll be filing complaints, criminal complaints against some of these people. But and first of all, it would not have gotten that far. They wouldn't have been lackadaisical about reporting what was happening. But we are in a time where blacks must begin to realize that until you are able to uplift your community economically and be on par with these other communities and have money to be able to buy off the politicians like the other ones are doing, then you're going to always be the last one to get any help. And this is a perfect example of what has happened here. And this is time now. It's time now for blacks to sit down and recognize what has happened and what can happen, not only in Flint, Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, anywhere there's a large population of blacks. This is what can happen to them, and we are very easy for picking, that where we can be dispersed of poison or whatever very quickly, because we're all concentrated in this particular area. But it's okay if we're concentrated in that area. But if we go in there and build up our own communities and we elect the proper people to come to operate and run our facilities, then we won't have these type of problems.
Well, you're much more optimistic than I am, Mac. So I applaud you on your optimism. But I think about this: how many bottles of water will it take for all of those celebrities to bring to Flint in order to equate it to the $1 billion that a Caucasian representative, Candace Miller, will be bringing to that city with one stroke of the pen? Now the other thing is this: in my lifetime, I've watched where Arabs, Asians, after 1975 and the collapse of Vietnam, people from Thailand, people from Vietnam have come to this country. And I was just at a Taiwanese restaurant the other day. They come here, they set up businesses, and they operate, and they're very cordial, and they provide good food, and we have good cooks and good chefs, and have facilities, and we've been here for much longer. And I can remember as a kid, I remember this young lady who went to school with us. Her family had a little restaurant that we used to go to get a hamburger every now and then. But you go into these communities today, and they're primarily people of, and there's nothing wrong with this. I'm not criticizing this, but I'm trying to make the point that you see, we black people in America don't, even though we've been here 500 years, we don't understand how this system works. And we're ignorant to how it works.
Well, that's Bob. Bob, that's because of one thing. Is because the very people who do happen to elevate themselves or get elevated or get pulled up or whatever, they don't reach back and try to educate and pull the other ones up. And I don't, for whatever reason that is, they continue on their very way, and they continue to forget about that they used to be in that same situation. Many of them did.
And right, and that's why I say that you're much more optimistic than I, because I have not seen that happen in my lifetime, and I don't believe I will see it happen. And for the rest of my life, even though
you saw it. Would be the case. You saw it happen during the 60s, early, and during the civil rights era. That was a much more togetherness and helping each other back during those times. At least where I came from, it was.
Well, that was more of a social movement. It was not an economic movement.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, you have to. Well, that's the same thing that Dr. King came to realize, that, that was social. But he came to realize that what we really needed was economics. So you have to apply the same concepts to the social, what you did during the social uprising, as well as during the civil rights era, as to the economic uprising that need to be taking place right now. So you got to apply those same concept of coming together. Either way, you got to come together.
And that's precisely my point. That we, as black people, don't understand that relationship that you just articulated. We are too ignorant. Most of us, not some of us understand that relationship, but most of us do not understand the joining of the political with the economic, the social with the economic.
Well, that's because we don't have leadership. We don't have real leadership in the black community. And it has to be, that leadership has to be protected. It has to be created. It has to be protected. And then, like you're saying, the ignorant people have to be educated. And this is where leadership comes into play. Until we get that type of leadership, that person that's willing to step out there and lead the people, just as Moses stepped out and led his people. You're a biblical scholar, I understand, and we need to do the same thing with the black people of today.
Well, I applaud your optimism back, but I'm going to go out on the limb and say it won't happen. I would love to see it happen, but it will not happen. Our people, Dr. Tulsa told me years ago when I was a student of his, our people are lost because we are ignorant, Brazelton. And I think he's absolutely right. We are a lost people. We're like the lost tribes, and it's not going to happen in my lifetime, I would be so happy. I would probably jump up and kick my heels together if I saw that happening. But it's not going to happen. I mean, I was well, I don't want to go into that kind of history, but the point is, our people are lost because we are ignorant. We're going to stay ignorant, and we're going to have these hired guns, these economic hitmen that keep coming into our communities, get $40,000 raises for continuing to kill off our kids. Because you see, the most devastating thing to me that has occurred in Flint, that is occurring in the school system down here in Detroit, is the young kids that are being literally killed by the inaction of this so-called leadership, the black leadership and the Caucasian leadership. These kids have, that stuff is in their system, and laying in their system is going to be with them for the rest of their lives. You don't see it in the black doctors, the scientists, coming out, going on these talking head shows, Meet the Press, Face the Nation, talking about how it's killing the black community. You don't see these NAACP urban league leaders going on these Sunday shows talking about they're killing off a future society, but it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. If you got 40 million people that are dredge on your overall society, and you want to kill them off, what do you start with? You start with the young, with the babies.
Well, that's how I started off this here diatribe here, this conversation this morning, Bob, was the fact that we are in a situation where things need to be changed, and it's true enough that the people that should be coming forth and trying to resolve some of these issues, and the only way we can resolve these issues are those so-called people, as you articulated there, the leadership in the black community. They must come together and quit thinking about how to fill their pockets with money. And they must start thinking about doing the right thing for the black community. And until that happens, we're going to continue to see things like this happen. I mean, this is only one thing. When they get ready to destroy, take over another city, what do? Like you said, they go in and they want to destroy. We talked about initially, I started off talking about the black genocide. I mean, first of all, you get rid of as many people as you can and disperse them. They did this when they wanted to take over New Orleans, get back and get control of that city again. They dispersed all of the blacks from that city. And how did they do it? Hurricane Katrina didn't do that. The levees didn't hold. And they knew that they had a problem with those levees. And they knew that what would happen. And because they could have had that problem fixed years ago. But they didn't do it prior to Katrina coming. And it was a day or two after Katrina had gone by when the levees failed. And that's the same thing is happening with Flint. They want to get back. You got General Motors up there. You got General Motors Institute through Kettering University. They want to rebuild and make that, like I've heard that Flint was the first auto city. So they want to make that back, and that's their that's their history. So they want to make that back into a historical community that it should be, in their opinion. And what they need to do is get rid of the people in the city, tear down those houses, and rebuild and have people to come back in, because they already have infrastructure there. It didn't make any sense for them to switch from that Flint, from Lake Huron water source to the Flint River. It wasn't any logic to that. I happened to travel in Michigan this past summer. I went up to St. Ignace, which is right across from the Mackinac Island there. And I happened to be walking along the coast right there, and that water was crystal clear. That was Port Huron, Bob. And so that water is the same way all the way down. is clear like that. Has not been tainted. Now, there must be something, some reason why they decide to go to a toxic river for drinking water for a community. And they didn't care anything about the collateral damage. They just want to get rid of those people. And what has that done? First of all, you got everybody talking about leaving that place or moving those who can. But the main thing is that the property value there has probably hit the bottom floor that it'll ever go to, you know. And so you can go in there and get property for a nickel on a dollar probably, you know. So this is the way they're going to move people out of there and take over. Now, go back. They did the same thing in Detroit. Exactly the same thing. So we have to wait and see. I don't expect, like you said, I'm not expecting tomorrow that the black people or black leadership are going to come together. I don't, like you said, they won't happen in my lifetime or your lifetime, maybe not even our children's lifetime. But until a leader step forth, and he has to be one that's to be protected, because as you can see from the past, our leaders have been killed. All that have stepped up to try to do right, they have been killed. Like, for instance, you take, even today, there's Bill Cosby. A lot of people, oh, he's not a leader. But do you have any other person that has given $100 million to education of black kids? He's the only one out there who ever given that type of money. And he's the only one that really walked around and telling blacks to pull up their pants. Instead of spending $300 on gym shoes, spend $300 on hooked on phonics. But no blacks have come to his rescue. Matter of fact, they all jumped on the bandwagon with all these news media to denigrate this man. I mean, you go back and look at history. When Bill Cosby was out there, they tell me by the history that more blacks went to, when he had this show, the Huxtables, more blacks went to college during that time period than any other time period in history. And now what have they done? They have taken that show off of reruns and everything. They have totally removed this man, or at least trying to remove him from history. And there will be no more Bill Cosby with the American Dad. They have done this. And they can do that to anyone. They did it to Michael Jackson. And where were all the blacks coming to the rescue or rallying? They know how the people do things. They know what real lynching was. They know what technical lynching is. And that's another lynching of a black man. And this goes on and on and on, Bob.
I would say this to your audience back. All they have to do, and talking about lynching, there's one author out here that I've been reading. His name is John Perkins, Perkins. He has written a book back in 2004 called The Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And he talks about precisely what you described, but he talks about how this empire that you described did this to other countries, and he cites chapter and verse instances that he personally was involved in. So what I think has happened is that they have concluded that in this elimination of individuals, of races of people, in order to get the population down from, say, 7 or 8 billion down to maybe 5 billion people throughout over the whole globe, they can start with experiments like Flint, little communities where the people are disposable. You have disposable human beings, little black babies, little black boys and girls just trying to get to kindergarten and get an education. We could start with them. We'll hire some black economic hitmen like this guy, and we'll send them in. They'll dispose of these kids. Nobody's going to know about it because the head leadership that hired us to pull it off are not going to talk about it. And then they could just go around and do this. If it works in Flint, then as you said earlier, we could take it to Baltimore, we'll take it to Cleveland, wherever we have these concentrations that we want to eliminate. And they're not just eliminating blacks, but blacks are the preponderantly larger group. They're eliminating any kids that are in that area because how are you going to stop the increase of population growth, but by eliminating the young, because they're the ones that are going to have babies in the future.
Well, look at this.
You eliminate them, and once you start that process, and we see how it works, and we'll have these clowns and all these buffoons. They'll come in with their bottled water and their songs and their dance. But that's all a part of the act because they're too ignorant to understand what's going on.
Well, look.
And if they will read John Perkins, they'll get an idea of what I'm talking about.
That's right. One of the things, too, Bob, right along those same lines, why is it that we have another virus that's out? They say it's been around a while, and you know about that from your having been a chemistry major. You know that some things about this here, and one of the things, the Zika virus. Why is it that these type of viruses always start in poor countries, in particular Africa, continent of Africa? Why do they always start there? The HIV virus, AIDS, or whatever they want to call it, and you name the Ebola virus, all of these things. But now, like you pinpointed right there, Bob, when you said they get rid of the youth, the kids start there. You know, this Zika virus, it affects the child while the child is in the womb.
That's right.
And boom, and that's the story right there. This thing catch on fire. Just think, that's gonna put a damper on birth throughout the world.
That's right. And that's precisely what it's doing.
They'll be born, but they will be born in a very bad state of being. You know.
Right. That's exactly right. And they've known this. You see, the mosquito, Aedes aegypti, that carries this Zika virus. You know, it's a very it's all over the world now. But Dr. Walter LaRue Jones, back in the 50s, he studied that virus. Not that virus, but that mosquito, Aedes aegypti. I think he did his dissertation on that, the swarming methods. Well, they've known that for 50 years, and now they've figured out how they could pass this virus. And most of us, if we get bit by a mosquito we might think we've got the flu, you know, but if it's a pregnant woman, she gets bitten by it, and the baby may be born with what they call microcephaly, which is a small head. And they've had, as the news reports say, 4,000 or 5,000 kids have been born like that. Well, they've known that in the colored nations of the world, and apparently it's quite prevalent in Brazil. Now it's moving up into this country, and it's going to affect all youngsters, not just blacks and not Brazilians who are also black, but it's going to affect all youngsters and all future pregnancies. So I don't know how you would characterize it. Maybe you might say, well, the genie's out of the bottle. That's a trite way of looking at it, but I don't know how to describe it. It's a very devastating circumstance, I can say that. and I don't think our people as a whole understand how destructive this whole circumstance is. We're more focused on, and we should. I'm not saying that we should not be, but if I had to put them on the scale of justice, I think the Zika virus would be much more of a greater concern to me than the Super Bowl, which is about to be played tomorrow. But that's where we are in humanity.
But those are those are distractions, Bob, and they know how to distract the masses.
Yes, that's right. So that's why I said earlier, I'm not as optimistic as I was when I wore younger man's clothes. I just don't think that because everything seems to lead to, or many things, not everything, but many things seem to lead to a dumbing down and a destruction of our society, a destruction and a dumbing down of our young people, a dumbing down and a destruction of our so-called leadership, because as you pointed out earlier, their interests, and there's nothing wrong. You need money in order to survive, in a capitalist economy. So there's nothing wrong without pursuing wealth, but you cannot discard your fellow human being. I mean, as it says in Scripture, as you do to the least of these, so do you do unto me. And it's okay to take bottled water to these places and try to help out, but have some perspective. Bottled water, like you said, how many bottled water does it take to take a bath or take a shower? And those people, if they're taking baths and showers, and they don't have to be drinking that water. That water will be that lead will be getting into their pores just by showering in it or sitting in that water. So it's not a pretty picture that we're looking at here, Mac. And the politicians and the so-called leadership are not doing anything to help the situation.
Well, we'll continue to watch the development of this Flint situation, Bob, and keep all of this in perspective. And I think that we should also keep in perspective what is happening in our communities. As you say, you don't see any hope. Well, we have to keep hope alive, as one of your so-called civil rights leaders used to say. You have to keep it alive some kind of way, because otherwise